Okay, we're making pastry cream. This recipe is on your in your module. So I want to go over the mise en place before I start cooking. So first thing, I have the milk, and I have the milk in two parts. I have 3/4 of the milk here and 1/4 of the milk separately. I am actually making a half batch, so the total amount of milk is 1 pound. So I have 12 ounces of milk and 4 ounces of milk here. I have the sugar divided as well. The total is 4 ounces, so it's scaled as 2 ounces and 2 ounces. I have some butter, which is 1.5 ounces, and I have it cut up into pieces. I have salt, a 1/16 of a teaspoon. I don't have a 1/16 of a teaspoon, so I took a 1/4 teaspoon and divided it in half. I have 1.5 ounces of cornstarch, 6 ounces of eggs. This is weight ounces, so I scaled that as 6 ounces of eggs. And then the last thing is the vanilla. So the recipe calls for vanilla bean because I like my students to learn how to use vanilla bean. I'm using bourbon vanilla beans. But if you don't have that, you can use vanilla extract. 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract is equal to 1 bean. I am going to use 1/4 of a bean for this half batch. So you would be using 1/4 of a tablespoon, which is 3/4 of a teaspoon. That's a whole separate lesson on tablespoons and teaspoons. So those are the ingredients that I have. The other things that I'm going to need are a fine mesh sieve or a sieve of some kind, a clean spatula, and I'm going to need to make an ice bath. This is a relatively dangerous, potentially dangerous food item, so we need to make sure that we get it through the danger zone very quickly. So I'll be cooling it on an ice bath. I'll get the ice later on. I'm going to be using a whisk, and I'm going to use another clean spatula. So it's very important. I have 2 spatulas. One spatula would touch raw eggs, so I never want to use that spatula that has raw eggs on it to touch the clean cooked pastry cream. So you'll see this as I go along and cook, but I just want to give you all of the mise en place, the ingredients, the equipment that you're going to need. I am going to prepare the vanilla bean so that you can see me do that. So I need 1/4 of a vanilla bean. So I'm going to eyeball a half and then take 1/4. Okay, I prefer to do this on parchment paper. I'm going to do it on the recipe so that you can see. I'm going to cut the bean horizontally in 2 halves. Okay, I'm going to cut that in half, and then I'm going to open it up and use the dull side of the knife to scrape out all the vanilla seeds inside. Okay, so I'm just showing you now how to prepare the vanilla. This and the pods are going to go into the pot. So all of that I scraped out and the pods are going into the pot. And I will be back in a moment to proceed with the cooking. Okay, I wanted to clarify something I just said. I'm using 1/4 of a 1/4 teaspoon. Okay, this is a 1/4 teaspoon. The recipe calls for 1/16. So I'm using a quarter of this teaspoon. If you have an eighth, you could do half of an eighth. So I just wanted to clarify that since I misspoke previously. The other thing I would like to clarify is if you are using extract, the extract will go at the end. I'm using bean because I would like to infuse the flavor of the pod, but vanilla extract is alcohol based and it will go off, it will evaporate when it gets hot. You'll lose some of the flavor. So we're going to add the vanilla extract. If you were using vanilla extract, you would add it after cooking. So I'm not using the extract, I'm using the bean. Either one is fine. You just add them at two different points in the cooking process. Okay, I'm going to start the cooking here. I have 3/4 of the milk and the vanilla in the pot. I'm going to add the salt and half of the sugar. And I'm going to bring that to a boil over fairly high heat. I will just use a spatula to stir as it's heating. This won't take very long. So because I'm using vanilla bean, I am going to heat this to boiling, and then I'm going to turn it off and cover it and leave it sit for 5 minutes to allow time for the vanilla pod to infuse. If you're using vanilla extract, you won't need to do that. So you do not have to stir this continuously, but since I'm talking and showing you how to do it, I'm going to try to say all the things that I need to remember. This is a small batch, so it won't take a lot of time to cook. It won't take a lot of, it's a relatively small amount of milk, so it won't take a really long time to heat up. I am going to use one of the bowls that I have for my ice bath. I'm going to use that to cover it up when it comes to a boil. If you have a lid for your pot, you can use that as well. I'm just trying to use as few dishes as possible. So I'm going to cover it with one of the bowls that I'm using for an ice bath. So it is not necessary to stir this continuously as it heats, but I'm in my own kitchen, which makes multitasking difficult. It's been heating for a couple of minutes here. It's just about at a simmer. So I want to be careful. I don't want to just go away and leave this because I'll lose a lot of moisture if the milk just boils. So I just want to catch it right at the point it's boiling, and then I'll remove it from the heat and cover it up. I have this on high, so it won't take very long. It's just on the edge of boiling now. See the surfaces moving. Okay. Just coming up to a boil. I'm going to turn that off, cover it, pull it to the side since it's an electric stove. That will stay very hot. And I'm going to leave that sit for 5 minutes. While it's sitting, we'll prepare the rest of the mise en place. Our vanilla bean is infusing in the milk, and I'm going to prepare the rest of my ingredients to finish the pastry cream. So I have a dry whisk here, and I'm going to combine the sugar and the cornstarch and mix them. The purpose of this step is to disperse the cornstarch in the sugar so that the cornstarch doesn't lump. If you're going to get lumps, that's the most likely place. So I'm just mixing it with a dry whisk. You could sift it, but there's no need to if you have a dry whisk. Okay. The next thing I'm going to add is the 1/4 of the milk. So what the milk is going to do, adding the milk here, will dissolve the sugar, leaving the cornstarch well dispersed and ensuring that I don't have lumps. It's a very quick and easy way to try to make sure, and this is one way to check if you have lumps. You take the bowl and tilt it. The lumps normally will stay up on the side. Okay, so the milk is added, and then the last thing is I'm going to add the eggs. And I just want to mix this smooth. You don't have to, do a lot of beating. You just want to make sure that everything is evenly mixed. And there we go. Now we're ready to go on to combining these.